Inside every believer, there are two versions of you fighting for the throne of your destiny. The version God designed before your mother ever held you, and the version life, fear, trauma, culture, and excuses forced you to become. One of them is chosen, the other is tolerated. One is powerful, the other is pitiful. One is anointed, the other is addicted. One walks by faith, the other crawls by fear. And God is not negotiating with the weaker version. God is not bargaining with your excuses. God is not adjusting his plan to fit your comfort zone. God is calling you to kill that weak version of yourself because that version is robbing you of the life heaven wrote with your name on it. That weak version is the thief inside your own soul, the traitor inside your own thoughts, the saboteur that talks you out of the very blessings you pray for. You don't need a demon to stop you when the weak version of you is already doing the enemy's job for him. So today, God is not asking you to fight the devil first. God is telling you to fight yourself. Not the self he created, but the self you trained, fed, protected, and justified for years. That weak you must die for the real you to live. The weak version of you was born the day you first accepted fear as your advisor. That version grew when you learned to apologize for your potential. It strengthened when you learned to bury your pain instead of confront it. It matured when you chose comfort over calling, entertainment over prayer, approval over identity, and survival over purpose. But the most dangerous moment wasn't when weakness appeared. It was when you started nurturing it. You fed it with excuses. You clothed it with justification. You protected it with blame. And you baptized it with self-pity. You began to trust it. You began to think it was normal. You began to believe that your limitations were your personality. And that is the most violent deception. When weakness disguises itself as identity and you start defending the very bondage God is trying to deliver you from. There is a version of you that God designed with courage, clarity, authority, and spiritual aggression. But that version is suffocating under the weight of the weak one. And the weak one doesn't die by accident. It dies by execution. It dies when you make a violent decision in the spirit. It dies when you stop negotiating with your fears. It dies when you stop giving yourself permission to stay the same. It dies when you stop protecting your wounds and start healing them. It dies when you stop seeking sympathy and start seeking transformation. Weakness is not destroyed by prayer alone. Weakness is destroyed by responsibility. Weakness is destroyed by discipline. Weakness is destroyed by decisions. Weakness is destroyed by the version of you that refuses to keep living beneath your calling. The weak version of you is always whispering. It says, play it safe. It says, don't forgive. It says, stay offended. It says, you've tried enough. It says, you've suffered too long. It says, you deserve a break. It says, you're only human. It says, everyone struggles. It sounds compassionate, but it is poison. Weakness always uses soft language to sabotage hard destinies. Weakness speaks your mother tongue. It knows how to sound like wisdom when it is really fear disguised as logic. Weakness speaks in a tone that comforts your flesh while killing your future. And the tragedy is that many people mistake the voice of weakness for the voice of peace. Weakness can make you feel calm while it strangles your calling. Weakness can make you feel justified while it handcuffs your potential. Weakness can make you feel safe while it buries your greatness alive. That is why God won't let you stay comfortable with weakness. That is why you keep feeling restless. That is why your spirit keeps stirring. That is why the same problems keep coming back. God refuses to let the weak you be the final version of you. God is provoking you to a spiritual war inside yourself. Killing the weak version of yourself begins with truth. Not the truth you tell others, but the truth you avoid telling yourself. You cannot kill what you keep protecting. You cannot overcome what you keep excusing. You cannot defeat what you refuse to confront. Weakness grows in the dark corners of your denial. Weakness thrives where honesty dies. Weakness multiplies where responsibility is rejected. So God starts the transformation by exposing the parts of you you keep hiding. He shows you your patterns. He reveals your habits. He highlights your inconsistencies. And at first it feels like an attack. It feels like God is being too hard on you. But He is not attacking you. He is attacking the version of you that is attacking your destiny. God is not hurting you. He is hurting what is hurting you. But because you identify so strongly with your limitations, you think God is wounding you when He is actually performing surgery on the weak you. That weak version of you is comfortable, predictable, familiar. It has become a friend to your fears and a companion to your doubts. You've carried it for so long that killing it feels like killing a part of your identity. But weakness is not who you are. It is who you learn to be. It is not your DNA. It is your disorder. It is not your nature. It is your narrative. You were not born weak. Life conditioned you. Culture shaped you. Pain humbled you. Disappointment trained you. Betrayal scarred you. Failure whispered to you. Rejection softened you. But God is here to restore you. Not the soft you, not the scared you, not the traumatized you, but the strong you that has been buried under years of spiritual neglect. Strength is your original identity. Greatness is your original calling. Dominion is your original assignment. But none of that can live while weakness rules your inner throne. Killing the weak version of you means removing every environment that feeds it. Weakness is not just internal. It is surrounded by a whole ecosystem built to sustain it. There are people who love the weak you because your weakness benefits them. They depend on your insecurities. They manipulate your fear. They rely on your hesitation. They take advantage of your emotional fragility. And when you begin to kill the weak version of yourself, these people will panic. They will say you've changed. They will say you've become cold. They will say you've become arrogant. They will say you think you're better because your weakness was their permission to misuse you. Your weakness made you predictable. Your weakness made you convenient. Your weakness made you controllable. But the moment you decide to kill that version of yourself, their access to your life ends. And people who benefited from your weakness will always call your strength offensive. Killing the weak version of you also means silencing the emotional lies that have been dictating your decisions. Weakness thrives on emotional impulses. It is fueled by moods, not mission. It is controlled by feelings, not faith. It listens to the voice of exhaustion, the voice of frustration, the voice of insecurity. The weak version of you magnifies problems and shrinks possibilities. It sees giants as threats instead of invitations. It sees storms as punishment instead of preparation. It sees delay as denial instead of development. And until you silence this emotional dictatorship, your destiny will remain hostage to your feelings. Emotions make great signals, but terrible leaders. And the weak version of you is nothing more than emotions sitting on the throne of your decisions. To kill that version, you must become spiritually intolerant. You must stop pampering what God is trying to crucify. You must stop negotiating with the voice that keeps shrinking your life. You must stop giving yourself permission to stay broken when God has already given you the power to be whole. Killing the weak version of yourself requires violent faith, aggressively saying no to every thought, behavior, habit, and environment that keeps you small. It requires saying yes to discomfort, yes to growth, yes to accountability, yes to discipline, yes to divine alignment. It means waking up early when the weak wants to sleep. It means praying when the weak wants to procrastinate. It means forgiving when the weak wants revenge. It means moving forward when the weak wants to hide. It means becoming the version of yourself your destiny has been waiting for. Inside every person destined by God, there is a war between obedience to purpose and obedience to weakness. And whichever one you obey becomes your master. Obedience is not optional. You are always obeying something. You are either obeying fear or obeying faith. You are either obeying your calling or your comfort zone. You are either obeying divine instruction or emotional hesitation. But the tragedy is that most people spend their lives obeying the weakest parts of themselves, and then wonder why their destiny feels delayed, why their prayers seem unanswered, and why their spiritual authority feels small. You cannot walk in the strength of your purpose while bowing to the voice of your weakness. You cannot pray for greatness while submitting to the version of you that avoids every responsibility attached to that greatness. Weakness is a dictator disguised as a friend. Weakness sounds gentle, but its goal is destruction. Weakness never shouts, it whispers, because whispered deception is more dangerous than shouted temptation. So when God calls you to kill the version of you that obeys weakness, He is calling you to end the dictatorship that has been ruling your decisions for years. Weakness becomes a master when you treat it as a consultant. You start by listening. Then you start obeying, and eventually you stop questioning it. Weakness tells you not to start, and you agree. Weakness tells you not to confront, and you obey. Weakness tells you not to apply, and you submit. Weakness tells you not to commit, and you comply. Weakness tells you not to trust again, and you surrender. And without realizing it, you are loyal to what is killing you. You are faithful to what is limiting you. You are obedient to what is shrinking you. Weakness becomes a routine, and routine becomes identity. You start thinking you are introverted when you are just intimidated. You start thinking you are cautious when you are actually fearful. You start thinking you are patient when you are actually paralyzed. You start thinking you are humble when you are actually insecure. Weakness is not who you are, but if you obey it long enough, you will swear it is your personality. And God is calling you to kill that illusion so your real identity can rise again. The version of you that obeys weakness is the version that edits every instruction God gives you. God says move, but weakness says think about it and you delay. God says give, but weakness says what if you need it later and you hold back. God says forgive, but weakness says they don't deserve it and you stay bound. God says build, but weakness says you're not qualified and you step back. God says speak, but weakness says you might fail and you stay silent. Every time you obey weakness, you disobey purpose. And every act of disobedience is a seed of delay planted in your own destiny. You are not waiting on God as much as you think. Often God is waiting for the strong version of you to rise and take the risks heaven already approved. Weakness keeps you studying opportunities but never seizing them. Weakness keeps you dreaming but never doing. Weakness keeps you planning but never progressing. Weakness convinces you that one day you will act, but one day becomes 1 week becomes 1 year, and 1 year becomes a decade. When you look back, you don't see spiritual attack. You see spiritual obedience to your weakest impulses. To kill the version of you that obeys weakness, you must first break the cycle of mental agreement. Weakness survives through your consent. It cannot control you without your cooperation. The voice of weakness only has power when you treat it as truth, but weakness is not truth, it is a suggestion. Weakness is not prophecy, it is preference. Weakness is not revelation, it is reaction. Weakness speaks from your wounds, not your potential. Weakness speaks from your fears, not your faith. Weakness speaks from your history, not your destiny. And as long as you obey the voice of the past, you will never enter the future. So God begins transformation by attacking agreements. He confronts the beliefs you have held for years. He challenges the lies you built your life around. He exposes the internal phrases you repeat to yourself that keep you obedient to fear instead of purpose. And this confrontation feels uncomfortable because God is not arguing with demons. He is arguing with your excuses. He is uprooting the internal laws you wrote without realizing they were killing your purpose. The version of you that obeys weakness is always seeking the path of least resistance. It always looks for the easiest route, the most comfortable option, the safest decision, the least painful conversation. But purpose is not birthed in comfort. Purpose is birthed in pressure. Destiny is not developed in convenience. It is developed in discipline. Weakness wants the crown without the cross, the results without the responsibility, the blessing without the burden. But God does not anoint weak obedience. God anoints willing obedience, consistent obedience, courageous obedience. Purpose requires a version of you that is willing to face what the weak version of you always avoids. It requires confrontation. It requires endurance. It requires sacrifice. It requires maturity. And weakness will always protect you from anything that requires maturity because weakness is allergic to growth. Weakness prefers the familiar cage over the unfamiliar freedom. Weakness would rather complain about bondage than take the risk of deliverance. When you obey weakness, you are choosing captivity disguised as comfort. Killing the version of you that obeys weakness means rejecting emotional leadership. Weakness thrives in environments where emotions make the decisions. When emotions lead, purpose suffers. When feelings lead, obedience is optional. Weakness always tries to make you wait until you feel brave, feel ready, feel confident, feel healed, feel inspired, feel strong. But destiny does not respond to feelings. It responds to decisions. Weakness says, when I feel better, I will start. Purpose says, start and you will get better. Weakness wants healing before action. Purpose demands action that produces healing. Weakness wants confidence before obedience. Purpose gives confidence after obedience. Weakness wants clarity before movement. Purpose gives clarity during movement. If you wait to feel strong before acting strong, you will wait forever. Weakness will always produce another excuse, another delay, another reason, another fear. And eventually weakness becomes a spiritual addiction. You crave safety more than you crave destiny. You crave comfort more than you crave growth. You crave ease more than you crave obedience. And God cannot build a kingdom through a believer who obeys their emotional instability more than their divine identity. To kill the version of you that obeys weakness, you must learn the spiritual art of self-command. Self-command is when your spirit leads your soul and your soul leads your body. It is when your identity leads your impulses. It is when your assignment leads your appetite. It is when your purpose leads your preferences. Weakness has no power over a believer who has learned to command themselves. Self-command is the opposite of self-sabotage. Self-command is when you do what heaven demands, even when earth makes excuses. It is when you act according to who you are becoming, not according to who you used to be. Self-command forces weakness into silence. But self-command requires discipline, and discipline is the enemy of weakness. Discipline exposes laziness. Discipline eliminates excuses. Discipline reveals potential. Discipline confronts immaturity. Discipline is the spiritual weapon that breaks the cycle of obedience to weakness. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, the weak version of you dies a little more. Weakness also survives through relationships that normalize it. If you surround yourself with people who excuse your weakness, you will obey it forever. Weakness loves company. Weakness attracts weakness. Weakness seeks friends who will comfort your excuses instead of challenge your potential. You cannot kill the version of you that obeys weakness while living in a community that celebrates it. The people who are comfortable with your weakness will panic when you start walking in strength. They will accuse you of changing because your obedience threatens their complacency. But isolation is not the answer. Elevation is. You need relationships that require strength from you. You need voices that challenge you, mentors that stretch you, environments that require your best, not your bare minimum. Growth requires pressure, and pressure requires people who refuse to let you settle for weakness. If the people around you don't challenge your weak obedience, they are part of the reason it survives. Weakness also thrives on spiritual inconsistency. Inconsistency is the breeding ground where weakness multiplies. When your prayer life is unstable, weakness gives the orders. When your discipline is unstable, weakness gives the instructions. When your habits are unstable, weakness becomes the leader. Weakness does not need you to be evil. It just needs you to be inconsistent. Inconsistency destroys purpose in slow motion. It kills momentum without you noticing. It convinces you that you are trying when you are simply repeating cycles. To kill the version of you that obeys weakness, you must become consistent in the small things. Consistency trains your spirit to take leadership. It builds internal authority. It conditions your mind for obedience. Consistency creates spiritual momentum that weakness cannot interrupt. Weakness can handle emotional moments, but it cannot survive disciplined consistency. Killing the version of you that obeys weakness requires spiritual aggression. You cannot be polite with the impulses that sabotage your destiny. You cannot negotiate with the thoughts that limit you. You cannot bargain with the fears that you. Weakness must be confronted with force, not physical force, but spiritual force. The force of decision, the force of conviction, the force of responsibility, the force of obedience. Weakness dies when you stop giving it permission. It dies when you stop treating it like a harmless personality trait and start treating it like the enemy of your assignment. Weakness is not your friend. It is not your comfort. It is not your protection. Weakness is the silent executioner of destiny, and killing it is not optional. It is commanded by your calling. There is a version of you that has learned to escape responsibility and disguise it as peace. And that version is one of the greatest threats to your destiny. It is the version that confuses avoidance with wisdom, silence with maturity, passivity with spirituality, and surrender with surrender to God. But avoiding responsibility does not bring peace. It only delays the war your purpose requires you to fight. You were never designed to live a life free of responsibility. You were created to carry authority, to manage assignments, to steward gifts, to build, to confront, to grow, to lead, to multiply, and to overcome. Avoiding responsibility is nothing less than rejecting the identity God breathed into you. And yet many believers have trained themselves to call their avoidance rest, patience humility, waiting for God, or protecting their peace. But the truth is much sharper. You cannot protect a peace you never earned. Real peace is the reward of responsibility, not the escape from it. And until you kill the version of yourself that avoids responsibility, your purpose will always remain a dream instead of a reality. The version of you that avoids responsibility was trained by pain. Every unfinished assignment, every betrayal, every disappointment, every failure became a teacher that taught you to run instead of rise. But pain was never meant to train you into avoidance. It was meant to train you into resilience. The enemy knows that if he can convince you to avoid responsibility, he doesn't have to defeat you. You will defeat yourself. Avoidance is self-sabotage dressed in emotional logic. It sounds reasonable but produces ruin. It sounds protective but produces paralysis. It sounds peaceful but produces poverty. Poverty of character. Poverty of destiny, poverty of discipline, poverty of spiritual authority. Mismanaged responsibility becomes a breeding ground for regret. Every area of your life that is broken carries the fingerprint of a responsibility you avoided. Every cycle you keep repeating is connected to a responsibility you refuse to confront. Every delay in your growth is attached to a responsibility you postponed. Avoidance always feels peaceful in the moment, but it always becomes painful later. The version of you that avoids responsibility is the laziest version of you. Not lazy in effort. You may work hard everywhere except where God actually assigned you. Many people are hardworking in distractions and lazy in destiny. They pour energy into everything except the one thing they were born to do. They waste strength on survival and call it maturity. They invest time into the temporary and ignore the eternal. They manage everyone else's problems while running from their own. And they mistake busy for progress, noise for purpose, and movement for growth. But the truth is painful. Avoidance is still avoidance even when it is productive. You can be productive and still be disobedient. You can be active and still be empty. You can be busy and still be bound to weakness. And the terrifying part is that this doesn't feel like rebellion. It feels like exhaustion. But exhaustion is often the disguise of misaligned priorities. You are tired not because life is heavy, but because avoidance makes everything heavier. Responsibility demands confrontation, and confrontation terrifies the weak version of you. It requires you to confront your habits, confront your inconsistencies, confront your wounds, confront your lack of discipline, confront your emotional cycles, confront your relationships, confront your finances, confront your faithfulness, confront your destiny. Avoidance wants comfort more than calling. It wants ease more than elevation. It wants safety more than strength. But you cannot become who God designed while living in the shadows of the responsibilities you refuse to carry. Every calling has a weight, and that weight is not punishment. It is permission. The anointing is always covered in responsibility. God never gives authority without assigning accountability. You cannot carry the glory of God while rejecting the grind required to maintain it. You cannot pray for more while running from what you have. You cannot ask for miracles while avoiding management. Responsibility is the gateway to promotion. Avoid responsibility and you automatically avoid growth. The version of you that avoids responsibility always creates excuses that sound spiritual. It tells you God will handle it when in reality God is waiting for you to handle what He already empowered you to manage. It tells you let go and let God, when the truth is you let go because you were afraid to hold on. It tells you I'm protecting my peace, when you are actually protecting your comfort zone. It tells you I'm still healing. When you are actually procrastinating, it tells you it's not the right time. When the real issue is you don't want the responsibility that comes with your next level. Avoidance uses holy language to justify hellish decisions. It makes you feel righteous while keeping you irresponsible. It protects your feelings while destroying your future. And the worst part is that avoidance grows stronger the longer you obey it. Avoidance is a master deceiver because it creates short-term relief while guaranteeing long-term crisis. It gives you a temporary sense of peace but multiplies future warfare. Avoiding responsibility in relationships creates heartbreak later. Avoiding responsibility in finances creates bondage later. Avoiding responsibility in spiritual growth creates emptiness later. Avoiding responsibility in discipline creates failure later. Avoiding responsibility and purpose creates regret later. Every time you avoid responsibility, you make a silent agreement with future pain. And the pain you will feel later is always greater than the discomfort you are trying to avoid now. That is why the Holy Spirit will not allow you to stay comfortable with avoidance. That is why you feel conviction. That is why your peace feels disturbed. That is why your spirit feels restless. Because God refuses to let your promise be buried by your avoidance. To kill the version of you that avoids responsibility, you must learn the spiritual skill of ownership. Ownership is when you take full responsibility for what God placed in your hands, your gift, your mind, your habits, your calling, your decisions, your progress, your relationships, your assignments. Ownership is not blame, it is authority. Ownership says if it is in my life, I will steward it. Ownership says if it is broken, I will fix it. Ownership says if it is weak, I will strengthen it. Ownership says if it is delayed, I will confront it. Ownership says if it is required, I will rise to it. Avoidance looks outside, ownership looks within. Avoidance blames others. Ownership builds self. Avoidance waits. Ownership works. Avoidance complains. Ownership commits. Ownership is spiritual adulthood, and God cannot trust you with destiny if you are still living in spiritual childhood. Responsibility is not bondage. It is God's vote of confidence in you. It is His acknowledgement that He placed something inside you worth managing. Avoiding responsibility is rejecting the greatness God put within you, and greatness is not proven in miracles. It is proven in management. Anyone can shout, dance, pray, and declare. But can you manage your emotions? Can you manage your discipline? Can you manage your prayer life? Can you manage your purpose? Can you manage your time? Can you manage your growth? Can you manage your calling? Responsibility exposes who you really are, while avoidance exposes who you fear you might be. And until you embrace responsibility, you will never experience the version of yourself that was designed to carry glory. Avoidance also keeps you small because it keeps you unchallenged. Responsibility forces you to evolve, but avoidance keeps you stagnant. Responsibility forces you to rise, but avoidance keeps you repeating cycles. Responsibility forces you to grow, but avoidance keeps you comfortable with weakness. Responsibility forces you to confront truth, but avoidance keeps you hiding behind excuses. Every time you avoid responsibility, you are choosing the version of yourself that you already outgrew. You are choosing your lower self at the expense of your higher calling. You are choosing safety over strength, ease over excellence, and survival over destiny. Responsibility is the door to your future, while avoidance is the chain that keeps you locked in your past. And here is the shocking truth. The version of you that avoids responsibility is not innocent, it is rebellious. Not rebellious against people, but rebellious against purpose. Every purpose demands responsibility. Every calling requires stewardship. Every destiny requires discipline. And the moment you avoid responsibility, you rebel against the very reason God created you. This rebellion is silent, subtle, and socially acceptable, but spiritually devastating. Heaven cannot endorse what you avoid. Angels cannot protect what you neglect. God cannot multiply what you refuse to manage. Your destiny will not open until you decide to carry what belongs to you. To kill the version of you that avoids responsibility, you must be willing to make decisions that shock your comfort zone. You must take on assignments that challenge you. You must step into roles that stretch you. You must start conversations that scare you. You must confront patterns that drain you. You must cut off distractions that weaken you. You must embrace discipline that stabilizes you. Responsibility is not always comfortable, but it is always transformational. Avoidance preserves who you are, but responsibility awakens who you were born to be. And now the ending rises like a sword. Every destiny has a deadline, and avoidance is stealing time you cannot get back. Every day you avoid responsibility, the weak version of you grows stronger and the destined version grows quieter. One of them will win, one of them will rule, one of them will define your entire future. And here's the truth that should shake your spirit awake. If you don't kill the version of you that avoids responsibility, that version will kill the future God planned for you. Something must die. Your avoidance or your destiny. You choose which one lives. There is a version of you that keeps reaching for the very things God delivered you from. And as long as that version is alive, your destiny will always remain one decision away, but never one transformation deep. Temptation doesn't always show up as sin. Temptation often shows up as the things you settle for when you forgot who you are. Temptation is not only a problem of desire, it is a problem of identity. You don't do something because it is strong. You do it because a weak version of you is still alive enough to choose it. Every temptation reveals the part of you that is still undisciplined, still unhealed, still ungoverned, still unsubmitted, still unconvinced that God's plan is better than your impulses. Temptation exposes the self you must kill if you want transformation to be permanent. The version of you that chooses temptation is not ignorant. It is irresponsible. It knows the consequences but gambles with grace. It remembers the pain but romanticizes the pleasure. It recalls the damage but exaggerates the comfort. Temptation survives through selective memory. It makes you remember the thrill but forget the destruction. It makes you recall the excitement but forget the emptiness. It makes you crave the moment but ignore the lifetime of consequences. Temptation always offers you shortcuts that cost more than obedience ever will. And until you kill the version of yourself that entertains temptation, temptation will always find a way into your decision-making. The most dangerous form of temptation is the temptation to return to what God already rescued you from. You pray to be delivered from it, but now you miss it. You cry to be free from it, but now you feel the urge to reconnect. You knew it wasn't good for you, but now it feels familiar enough to be comfortable. The enemy doesn't tempt you with new chains. He tempts you with old ones, old habits, old patterns, old desires, old relationships, old cycles, old addictions, old mindsets, things you outgrew but never buried. Growth without burial guarantees relapse. You cannot walk into resurrection power while keeping your grave clothes in your closet. You cannot walk in newness while storing your old patterns just in case. Temptation is not powerful. Your refusal to bury your old self is what keeps giving it a place to land. Transformation demands sacrifice, but temptation demands secrecy. Temptation survives in the dark. It feeds on the chapters of your life you don't let the Holy Spirit rewrite. It thrives in the areas you refuse to confront. It grows in the shadows of denial, excuses, justification, and emotional loopholes. Temptation always becomes stronger where there is no accountability. It becomes louder where there is no discipline. It becomes consistent where there is no surrender. You cannot kill temptation by resisting it once. You kill it by robbing it of the version of you that still wants it. Transformation is violent. It requires you to destroy attachments your flesh still craves. It requires you to walk away from people your emotions still miss. It requires you to break habits your body still remembers. It requires you to silence voices your heart still trusts. It requires you to reject patterns your history still prefers. Transformation is not a gentle shift. It is a war inside you where only one version of you will survive. The version that protects your future or the version that protects your urges. The version that honors your calling or the version that honors your cravings. The version that obeys God or the version that obeys appetite. One of them must die. The version of you that chooses temptation often hides behind emotional logic. You tell yourself, I'm lonely, I'm stressed, I deserve this, it's not that bad, I'll stop later, it's only once. At least it's better than what I used to do. Nobody will know. God understands my weakness. And while you're comforting yourself with lies, temptation is killing your progress quietly. Temptation doesn't destroy destiny publicly. It destroys it privately, decision by decision, small compromise by small compromise, until you wake up one day and realize you are spiritually dehydrated and emotionally polluted. It is possible to love God but still sabotage yourself. It is possible to feel anointed but still be undisciplined. It is possible to pray loudly but obey temptation quietly. To kill the version of you that chooses temptation, you must understand that temptation is always tied to an unhealed wound. You don't crave the temptation. You crave the comfort it gave you. You don't want the habit. You want the numbness it provided. You don't want the person. You want the validation they offered. You don't want the sin. You want the escape it created. Temptation is an emotional shortcut to a comfort. God wants to give you his way. But as long as you choose the shortcut, you will never taste the real thing. God cannot heal what you keep feeding. God cannot cleanse what you keep reopening. God cannot strengthen what you keep tempting. Some believers don't need more deliverance. They need more decision. The version of you that chooses temptation also thrives in boredom. When purpose is not active, old patterns become attractive. Idle time is the breeding ground of spiritual relapse. You fall back into cycles not because temptation is strong, but because purpose has been silent. When your calling is loud, temptation becomes faint. When your assignment is active, temptation becomes irritating. When your growth is intentional, temptation becomes inconvenient. Purpose is not just protection, it is insulation. A life full of purpose leaves no room for the weak version of you to negotiate with temptation. But here is the hardest truth. God will not remove a temptation you enjoy. He only removes what you surrender. You cannot kill temptation while feeding appetite. You cannot kill temptation while protecting access. You cannot kill temptation while keeping its number saved, its door unlocked, its environment nearby. You cannot rebuke what you still crave. Transformation requires demolition. You cannot remodel a house infested with termites. You must destroy the entire structure before rebuilding. Likewise, you cannot restructure a life built on old desires. You must kill every trace of the version of you that keeps choosing temptation. Temptation lives as long as you negotiate with it. Every negotiation keeps the old version alive. Every just once keeps the old version breathing. Every it's not that serious keeps the old version functioning. Every no one will find out keeps the old version growing. You don't defeat temptation with willpower. You defeat it with surrender, discipline, boundaries, exposure to light, and a ruthless commitment to your future. You don't overcome temptation by avoiding it. You overcome it by becoming a version of you who is too disciplined to be deceived by it. And now the ending shocking enough to shake your spirit awake. There are only two versions of you standing on the battlefield of your destiny right now. One is armed with purpose, conviction, discipline, and surrender. The other is armed with excuses, appetite, secrecy, and habit. One of them is the version God created. The other is the version your flesh trained. And whichever one you feed will win. Whichever one you protect will survive. Whichever one you nurture will become your identity. Here is the chilling truth. If you don't kill the version of you that keeps choosing temptation, that version will kill every future God intended for you. It will kill your calling. It will kill your confidence. It will kill your clarity. It will kill your spiritual authority. It will kill your ability to hear God. It will kill your potential, your peace, your purpose, and eventually your entire identity. Temptation doesn't just want a moment. It wants your destiny. And the most terrifying part, the weak version of you is ready to take over your future if you don't bury it.